want to thank the member for pointing out that we have voted against every single program that doubled housing costs in Canada. This Prime Minister created the biggest housing crisis in the G7 when he was the Bank of England governor. And now he's come here to adopt the same Trudeau-era policies of building bureaucracies rather than building homes. And he promised this was all going to change, that the latest bureaucracy would change everything. But today, the parliamentary budget officer proved that he'll only build 2% of what he promised. Why does this Prime Minister block homes and break promises?
Grab a double-double, scoot your chair closer, and brace yourself, buddy, because what you're about to witness isn't just another day in the House of Commons. No, this wasn't a debate. It wasn't even an argument. This was Pierre Poilievre stepping up to the parliamentary plate like he's about to slap-shot a frozen puck straight through the rafters and right into the political mythology of the nation. And the unlikely star of today's spectacle? None other than Mark Carney, who wasn't technically speaking in the chamber, but, oh boy, was he being roasted, toasted, and slow-cooked by association? You ever seen someone get sunburnt from a heat lamp 2 rooms away? That was Carney today. Pierre wasn't just asking questions. The man was launching rhetorical fireworks so bright, you could probably see them from Thunder Bay. But before we dive into the parliamentary rodeo, I gotta ask you something real quick, folks. If you're loving these breakdowns, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Seriously, over 98% of you watch without subscribing. It's like showing up to the potluck empty-handed and leaving with all the leftovers. Doesn't cost you a dime, but it helps this channel more than a Tim Hortons donut helps morale on a cold February morning. Did you click it? Beauty. Thanks a bunch. Now, back to the political bonfire.
That minister was literally the mayor of the city that became the most expensive housing market in all of North America.
Sit down, gay nerd.
Los Angeles, Chicago, and now he brags that not only will they only build about 2% of the homes that they promised during the election, but they're spending $13 billion to do it, Mr. Speaker. Failing is bad. Failing expensively is even worse. So rather than having the costly mayor stand up and answer for him, will the Prime Minister have the courage to answer for himself? Where are the homes he promised?
There you go.
Mr. Speaker, I'm so proud of the City of Thunder Bay, who just passed through their council.
The Minister may begin from the top.
Mr. Speaker, all across the country, municipalities are stepping up to make new housing available for some of the most vulnerable people in our community. Take the City of Thunder Bay, who just last night, through their council, approved a motion to free up surplus city land for 1,400 homes, facilitated by the Housing Accelerator Fund, Mr. Speaker. That's the work of a government who's behind communities, who's behind people. And here's what we can say about the Conservatives. They vote against the very people that need that help. Mr. Speaker, we're building Canada strong with municipalities like the Municipality Marathon who's here today.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, I want to thank the member for pointing out that we have voted against every single program that doubled housing costs in Canada. This Prime Minister created the biggest housing crisis in the G7 when he was the Bank of England governor. And now he's come here to adopt the same Trudeau-era policies of building bureaucracies rather than building homes. And he promised this was all going to change, that the latest bureaucracy would change everything. But today, the parliamentary budget officer proved that he'll only build 2% of what he promised. Why does this Prime Minister block homes and break promises?
The Honourable Minister of Housing and Infrastructure.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, it's rich for the Leader of the Opposition to speak about this. As we all know, when he was Housing Minister and I was the Mayor of Vancouver, he built 6 homes as a Housing Minister. That's a deplorable record. And it's deplorable that the members opposite won't support a budget that has $13 billion for affordable housing, that the Parliamentary Budget Officer states will build 86,000 affordable homes. You won't vote for that, you won't support affordable housing, and that matches your historical record.
Wow.
the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, it was 200,000 homes, and the average cost of buying one was $450,000, Mr. Speaker.
Yeah, suck
the
on
average
that.
rent for a one-bedroom was $900. This government came along and built bureaucracy to block homes and printed money to inflate their costs. They allowed mass immigration that was out of control that ballooned demand and left us with the worst and most expensive housing anywhere in the G7. And today, the Parliamentary Budget Officer blew the lid off their latest promises, showing that they will build about almost none of the homes that they actually promised in the last election. Why won't the Prime Minister stand in the House and take account for that?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, the lid's been blown off, but the lid's been blown off the tired lines of the Leader of the Opposition, which he's been using for 2 years. He has systematically stood in the way of investments in supportive, in social, in low-cost and low-income housing in this country throughout his exclusive 20-year career in this House of Commons. He has systematically stood in the way of supports like dental care, like child care, like the Canadian Child Benefit, like school nutrition, the very things that he fakes and pretends to care about in this House, but would vote against, and Canadians know he would vote against everything with care in the name, Mr. Speaker. He needs to...
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, it is impossible for us to vote against affordable housing because there is no affordable housing after 10 years of this Liberal government. Now, one positive idea we could all agree on is to reduce the cost of the steel, the concrete, the cement, the glass that goes into building homes. But unfortunately, this Liberal government has an industrial carbon tax whose stated purpose is to raise the cost of all of those things. Why won't they accept this positive idea to take taxes off home building so that our youth can finally have homes, jobs, and hope like they deserve?
Let's go, let's go. If you haven't yet already, folks, hit the like button and subscribe to the channel.
Yesterday it was distressing to see member of parliament after member of parliament from the Conservative side vote against and argue against relieving consumers of the price of carbon, which we have, as you know, in this bill in front of the House, promised to do, which they voted against. Mr. Speaker, they will vote against a tax cut for 22 million Canadians. Mr. Speaker, something again that Conservatives like to talk about, lower taxes, but in actuality, fight against. So who are they really fighting for, Mr. Speaker? Because it sure isn't the Canadians or the Conservatives I'm talking to in Thunder Bay's period.
Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, the industrial carbon tax is not just a tax on homes, it's a tax on food. When you tax the steel that goes into farm equipment and the fertilizer that is necessary to grow food, when you tax the food processor, you tax the food. No wonder that since this Prime Minister took office, food prices have increased roughly 40% faster in Canada than they have in the United States. Canadians deserve affordable, nutritious, delicious food on their plate. Will the Prime Minister stand up now and agree to get rid of the industrial carbon tax so that Canadians can afford to eat?
Well, first he's got to come back into the House because he literally ran away.
Mr. Speaker, here we go again with the imaginary taxes. And as my colleague just said, when presented with the opportunity to vote for a tax cut for every single income taxpayer in this country, they say no. When they get a chance to vote to cut the GST, to remove it on the GST for first-time home buyers, they say no. When they get the chance to vote for the removal of the consumer carbon tax, what do the Conservatives say? No, Mr. Speaker. When the time comes to vote to give Canadians a break, what do the Conservatives say? No.
Mr. Speaker, yesterday Algoma Steel laid off 1,000 workers, and those workers remember when the Liberal Prime Minister stood on their shop floor in Sault Ste. Marie just days before the last election and promised to protect their jobs. But today, those same workers face U.S. tariffs, no deal, and now no job. And to add insult to injury, this Liberal government just gave Algoma Steel $400 million with no jobs guarantees, apparently, because now there's 1,000 Canadian workers out of a job before Christmas. So when will the steel workers get the promised protection for their jobs from this Liberal government?
The Honourable Minister of Industry.
Of course, our thoughts are with the workers at Algoma Steel. I've been in contact with the
Shut the
company. I've been
fuck up,
also in
Jolie.
contact with the union. And obviously, we know that the entire business sector of the entire business model of the steel sector in Canada is based on U.S. automakers. And obviously, with unjustified and unjustifiable tariffs of 50%
Oh my God, she doesn't even believe what she's saying.
This can't happen. So we've been
Oh my God. No, no, I don't want people to hear what you have to say because it's full of shit. No. Denied.
The honourable member for Kildare
Wow.
St. Paul.
Mr. Speaker, the Liberals promised to protect Canadian jobs, yet the reality is thousands of Canadian families are now going without their primary source of income because the Liberals haven't delivered on their promises. Softwood lumber mills are closing, auto companies are cancelling projects in Canada and moving them to the United States, and in Sault Ste. Marie, now 1,000 people have just lost their jobs at the steel mill. So workers don't need more Liberal platitudes or corporate handouts or broken promises. They need their jobs back. They need results. So when are Canadians going to get the trade deal we were promised?
The Honourable Minister of Industry.
Mr. Speaker, newsflash, we're in a trade war. And so therefore,
Are we now?
Algoma Steel and across the steel sector in the country. And that is why we've been there for the...
So picture this. Pierre Poilievre rises from his seat like someone just dared him to do a backflip into a pile of spreadsheets. He looks across the chamber with that expression Canadians have come to recognize. Part accountant, part prosecutor, part dad, who just found out the family car was returned without any gas in it. And he launches into his opening shot, reminding everyone that the minister across the aisle once presided over the city that became the most expensive housing market in North America. Not even just Canada, North America. Los Angeles, cheaper. Chicago, cheaper. Vancouver, nope. Rocket launched into the stratosphere. Thank you kindly. And Pierre, in true Canadian roasting fashion, polite but pointed, like someone saying sorry while sliding a hot cup of coffee across the table that's definitely too full, reminds the House that not only did the Liberals promise to build a mountain of homes, but they're now only delivering 2% of what they said. 2%. That's the political equivalent of promising a backyard swimming pool and delivering one of those tiny inflatable foot baths you get at Dollarama. And then, my favorite bit, he points out they spent $13 billion doing it. $13 billion bucks on bureaucracy instead of buildings. As he puts it, failing is bad. Failing expensively is even worse. That line alone could have powered the House for a week if sarcasm were renewable energy. Patty Hajdu jumps in like she's trying to referee a hockey fight where both players already dropped the gloves. She boasts about Thunder Bay freeing up land for housing, 1,400 homes on surplus land, she says, proudly, and good for Thunder Bay, truly. But Pierre wasn't asking about Thunder Bay. He was asking why the federal government turned home building into a scavenger hunt full of forms, fees, committees, consultations, environmental impact reviews, heritage assessments, peer-reviewed footnotes, and probably a mandatory knitting circle. Patty's response was the equivalent of being asked why the oven is on fire and the answering with, well, the microwave's doing great. Then Pierre gets up again, and you can practically hear the popcorn popping as he starts winding up. He thanks the minister for pointing out that Conservatives voted against the very programs that doubled housing costs in Canada, which, in this parody version, is Pierre basically saying, yup, we voted against the flaming toaster because it was a flaming toaster, Janet. And then, without missing a beat, he slides in a jab at Mark Carney. This prime minister created the biggest housing crisis in the G7 when he was the Bank of England governor. Now, is that technically tied to the PM? Debatable. Is it hilarious in this over-the-top political rodeo? Absolutely. It's Pierre treating Carney like the spiritual forerunner to every housing statistic from here to Newfoundland. The man is getting dragged into the debate like a referee getting pulled into a bench-clearing brawl. Gregor Robertson jumps up next, clearly having been waiting his turn like someone in line at Service Canada who finally hears their number called. And he says, without a shred of irony, that when Pierre was housing minister, they built 6 homes. 6. Not 60. Not 6,000. 6. You could fit those 6 homes on one cul-de-sac and still have room for a snowbank and a friendly neighborhood moose. Gregor says it's a deplorable record. And honestly, The delivery was so serious, it sounded like he was reading a eulogy at the funeral for affordable housing. Pierre, not missing a beat, stands again and delivers numbers like he's dealing blackjack. 200,000 homes when he was minister, $450K average sale price, $900 average rent. And then he slides right back into his favorite theme. The Liberals built bureaucracy, not houses. They printed money, ballooned demand, and opened the immigration tap way faster than cities could build the infrastructure people need. And in this parody, Pierre's tone is basically, how did we end up with the most expensive monopoly board in the G7? And why is everyone pretending this was part of the plan? Stephen McKinnon rises next with the energy of a man who has rehearsed this speech in the shower for 3 days straight. He insists the lid has been blown off. Pierre's talking points. The problem is, no one's quite sure what lid he means. Is it the lid to the carbon tax? The lid to the housing crisis? The lid to the political Tupperware container holding the last scraps of credibility? Hard to say. What we do know is Stephen launches into a 20-year biography of Pierre Poilievre's voting record, listing every social program, every tax credit, every benefit Pierre has ever rejected. It was like watching someone dump an entire grocery receipt onto the table and circle every line item with a Sharpie. Pierre pops up again. At this point, the poor speaker must have burned half his daily cardio just from turning his head back and forth, and insists it's impossible to vote against affordable housing because, well, there isn't any. Not after 10 years of this government, he throws in a positive idea about lowering the cost of construction materials by removing the industrial carbon tax. And this is where the parody gloves come off. Pierre explains, slowly, carefully, like a teacher explaining fractions to a goldfish, that when you tax the steel, the cement, the glass, and the concrete, oh look, you also tax home building. Shocking. Truly revolutionary. Patty jumps back in, horrified, to insist conservatives voted against relieving consumers of carbon pricing, which Pierre clearly believes is the parliamentary equivalent of being accused of stealing cookies while holding the empty jar, but insisting the jar was empty when you got there. She asks dramatically, who are they really fighting for? And somewhere in the back, a political strategist probably whispered, that line sounded better on paper. Pierre stands again, this time locked in like he's unveiling the final twist in a Netflix documentary. He explains that the industrial carbon tax isn't just a tax on homes, it's a tax on food. Tax the equipment, tax the fertilizer, tax the processor, tax the transport, and surprise, the tomato costs more than a hockey ticket. And he notes, again, with the calm fury of a Canadian who's been waiting behind someone paying for groceries in pennies, that food prices rose 40% faster than in the U.S. under this government. His question? Will the PM finally scrap the industrial carbon tax so Canadians can eat without needing a financing plan? Stephen McKinnon returns with the imaginary taxes argument like he's trying to convince the nation that the real problem is Pierre's imagination, not inflation. He lists more things Pierre allegedly votes against. At this point, the back and forth has the same energy as two guys at a bar arguing whether poutine or butter tarts are the superior Canadian food. Heated, passionate, and absolutely never resolved. And finally, Raquel Dancho rises, bringing in a real-world example of layoffs at Alma Steel. 1,000 workers losing jobs right before Christmas because tariffs weren't resolved and promises weren't kept. She reminds the House of the Prime Minister standing in the steel plant making promises he couldn't deliver. Raquel delivers this with the emotional weight of someone standing up for those workers directly, because she is. Even in parody, her moment hits hard, because no matter the political theater, real people are feeling real consequences. And through all of this, the ghost of Mark Carney hangs over the chamber like a portrait that keeps getting pointed at. Pierre invokes him as a symbol, a metaphor, a recurring cameo appearance in this masterclass of question period roasting. Carney didn't need to be in the room to feel the rhetorical shrapnel. Pierre made sure every reference landed with pinpoint, Made in Canada accuracy. This was the Waffle Olympics, the verbal hockey finals, the bureaucracy smackdown of the century, and Carney was today's unwilling mascot. And that, folks, is how the House of Commons didn't just erupt, it boiled, bubbled, and spilled over like someone forgot to turn the heat down on the political pressure cooker. Pierre Poilievre unleashed a full Canadian blizzard of questions, metaphors, and zingers, each one circling back to a single, unavoidable truth. If Canadians can't afford homes, can't afford food, and can't trust the promises being made, then something's got to give. And today, that something was the patience of the entire House. If you enjoyed this wild ride through question period, make sure you drop a like and subscribe for more over-the-top political breakdowns delivered with a Canadian twist. And hey, let me know in the comments, do you think Pierre went nuclear today? Or are we still warming up?